Okay. You tell me when to go.
Let's see.
Yeah,
I think
people are all
everybody's
coming
in for now, so you can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our community of practice this morning. We're so really excited to have Hedy Chang, the Executive Director of Attendance Works, and Sonya from East Hartford Public Schools to share their work together and to share what's some of the real great practices that are happening in East Hartford. Of course, our fearless leader, Kari Sullivan, is here to share some updates as well as we work and we facilitate this community of practice for you during this very, very busy time for all school leaders and district personnel. So welcome. Everyone please just drop your name and role and district or school in the chat. That would be great, because this way we can really try to capture who's in our space, and we keep some themes, and this way we can keep our listserv always updated. All right, thank you so much for that. So this is just really our agenda for today. We have, Kari will lead us in our updates, and then Hedy Chang will lead us and facilitate a conversation around, our toolkit for communicating with students and families. And then we're going to do a spotlight on some of the real great work that East Hartford is doing. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms to do some in a think tank, and then we'll close. So welcome, everyone. Here is our attendance and engagement work group. So we meet on a very regular basis to really continue to plan and coordinate the work and to try to get the different perspectives in the space to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of our groups of students that we serve out in our schools and districts. As we kind of close out this last community of practice for the year, we just really will continue to engage in this format around just that collective critical inquiry, and that we're all in a common collaborative definition of who we are as a community of practice and the roles that we serve to best address attendance and engagement. So I'm going to turn now this over to Kari Sullivan.
Okay, thank you, Steve. If you could watch the door, there's people coming in the waiting room. So
sure.
Let them in. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Kari Sullivan Custer with the State Department of Education, and I'm going to go over some of what's new at SDE pretty quickly, but we'll be sending out a link to the slides. We'll actually drop it into the chat and then send it out. So you'll have all of these. So this is a little bit of good news. So we've been watching our monthly attendance trends, and we can see that we're continuing to see our trends, our chronic absence rate decrease since our peak back in January and Omicron. Every month we're going down a little bit. It averages out about 4,000 less kids chronically absent each month. And so we're seeing our numbers drop. So everything we're doing is having an impact. And I just wanted to share that with you, because we always start with the data, right? We're still high. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're going in the right directions. Next slide, please. I just want to share with you, you saw here how I do our monthly trend data. The data is just a click away for all of you. The link is here, and you can use the QR code to look at your own school's data, your district data by student group, by grade. I show the slide every time. So, but this is here for you, and it's part of the new Ed site as well. So, next slide, please. If you recall, back in February, our Chief Performance Officer, Ajit Kripala Christian, did a workshop on an overview of the protocol tool for examining monthly attendance. It is a Word document with links to where you can find your own district and school attendance. It asks some questions, and I just put it there to show you just how simple it is to use. And you can, as a school attendance team or district attendance team, use this tool to analyze your data. It really is helpful. Next slide, please. I mentioned the new EdSite. We did launch a new version, updated version of EdSite, and it's more dynamic. There's more graphs and reports, but I wanted to be sure to show you that on the left-hand side, we're to get to our monthly student attendance data that we're used to going to. Now it's in a new location. It's down in the bottom right-hand corner where I've highlighted it yellow. And so it also has the QR code and the link here too. But if you're looking around for it, it's at the bottom. It's called Supporting Student Attendance. Next slide, please. The ARP ESSER stakeholder engagement. We are holding some forums. I think the first one is today and the second one is next week. There's a flyer to share with your stakeholders so that they can give us feedback, the State Department of Education, feedback on ARP ESSER funding and how we're using it. So you can download that and share that with families, teachers, community members. So really would like to have a good turnout for these. Next slide. So it's that time of year again for the Governor's Summer Reading Challenge. And we have here resources. This is a great web page for this reading challenge. Read Beyond the Beaten Path. And there's resources by grade level and other resources here for the schools and districts and families and your community partners. So that just was launched this week. Next slide, please. This is, it's kind of hard to see, but this was guidance from the Department of Public Health with SDE on COVID-19 guidance update. It was issued in the middle of April. We have been doing this for the last 2 years with our partner at DPH, but getting a lot of questions from families and students about when they should have their students come to school and when they should stay home. And so there's a sample letter and messaging here that I wanted to make sure everyone had access to help you send consistent and accurate messages to families and staff. This is something that might be helpful for your home visitors, your family resource centers, those folks who are interacting with families on a regular basis. And I just posted on Talk Tuesday this week. This was our topic of conversation. We had Dr. Ann Mead from Danbury talk about their partnership with the Ridgefield VNA. And we had Chloe Ann Grabowski from our office, our ed manager for health services and family engagement, talk about this. And we also talked about strategies for getting those physicals and immunization requirements completed and how to work with families. So that is on our Talk Tuesday website. I'll put the link in the chat. That's been updated. The slides are on the Talk Tuesday website. And I'll put that in the chat for you once I'm done talking. But if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Next slide, please. So from our partners here at the state level, at CREC, the Connecticut Welcoming Schools Initiative is having sort of an information session. This is an excellent program where you work with stakeholders to see how welcoming is your school. Parents are engaged as well as your other community partners. So that's available for you. I believe it's next week on May 26th. And the next slide is our friends at the Governor's Prevention Partnership are having a showcase on school-based mentoring. School-based mentoring is an ideal strategy, research-based for building relationships for with students, especially those secondary, middle, and high school students who need relationships to encourage them to come to school. And Susan Weinberger, who's nationally known as the leader in mentoring. She's been doing it in Norwalk for years and years and years. And so she'll be the keynote speaker, and it looks really interesting, a great use of your ESSER funds. And they also provide training for districts for mentors and for how to coordinate a mentoring program. So that might be something you'd like someone at your district to attend. Next slide, please. All right, and it's my pleasure. Good morning, Hedy, Chang, welcome. welcome to Connecticut. And Hedy's going to talk to us about their new toolkit, Showing Up Matters for Real, and the messaging. Every year they put out a new toolkit and messaging campaign. So we want to make sure that everyone has it here in Connecticut, and we value your partnership. Thank you, Hedy.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, Kari, though not actually physically in Connecticut, but I'm always with you in spirit and here able to be with you virtually. So this new toolkit, Showing Up Matters for Real, is a toolkit that we actually recently created because we were hearing that some of the messaging that we've historically been using around attendance, missing 2 days a month can add up to too much lost learning time, wasn't quite working right now. Because when you think about what's happened with everyone, folks have missed so many days as a result of quarantine. You also have a lot of challenges around, folks have faced it's been such a tough year. Starting with that missing 2 days a month actually doesn't create that relationship and engagement that we're hearing is so important to start off with families. So we started to come and talking with folks, and we've been sort of testing these ideas across the country to see if there's another way of thinking about how you message. And we also wanted to create an easy to remember, if you will, acronym that people could think about to keep these tips in mind. So the idea is Showing Up Matters for Real, because it's an opportunity to build routines, increase engagement, provide access to resources, and support learning. And then let's go into each one of these. And Stephen, I'm going to have you click. So build routines. Daily attendance routines are so important because they can reduce stress, create a sense of safety and security, especially after chaotic transitions. Next slide, click again. Because when you show up, it's an opportunity to increase engagement, because being in school helps build relationships with peers, school staff that nurture engagement. Click again. It's an opportunity to gain access to resources, because we know that schools are such an important access point for meals, for health, mental health services, tutoring, mentoring, technology, extracurriculars, after school and summer programs. And then coming in with it, Showing Up Matters for Real, because it's an opportunity to support learning. I will say a couple other things. We think about this in at least two ways. One is that this is an opportunity to think about how you explain things to families. It's also an opportunity to think about what do you have to have in place as a school and a school system to make sure that coming to school is meaningful. We also, and this is something that we're developing with LEAP, we are also putting this on our website. We actually think this messaging, given where we are in the school year, is a really good opportunity to think about how do you encourage families to sign up and show up for summer programs. Because summer programs then can also be an opportunity to maintain routines, especially when things have been so disrupted. Make sure that kids keep getting engaged and connected to other peers and adults in their communities, can also gain access to resources. And again, it's an opportunity to support learning, ideally through fun, enriching kinds of activities that are easier to do sometimes when you have the flexibility of the summer. So Showing Up Matters for Real. And then the last thing I just say is we also know that, so this acronym is so you can think about routines, engagement, access to resources and learning. And it's also possible that while you're using these talking points, you might have to tailor which one you start with, depending on where a family is. So if a family's been, let's say, just struggling with making basic needs, housing, maybe you start with access to resources. But then you follow up with, and it's not, let's help you with those resources. And you know what, if we can get your kid back into this routine or sustain a routine of showing up, that will also be helpful, because I know these transitions have been incredibly chaotic. So that's our thinking about how this would work. Next slide. I'd love to just spend a moment. Do these talking points resonate? Could you weave them into it? How might into your interactions? are there thoughts about how you might use this to encourage students and families to take advantage of summer learning programs? And if folks want to either put thoughts in the chat, or if you're willing to say something, you can raise your hand. Just love to hear some reactions, thoughts about how you might use this. While you're thinking about this, let me just offer up a couple other resources to remind you of ways to connect to it. Next slide. So, by the way, all of this with talking points, with other resources, they all sit in an attendance, in a linked online toolkit that has more resources, and it's organized around explaining why attendance matters, cultivating a culture of engagement and attendance, using data to determine need for intervention, and engaging community partners. And we're constantly adding these resources. And then the next slide, just wanted to offer up, like one of the resources that you can connect in with this is our, and I know many of you already use our success plan, but that's a way of reminding folks about the importance of relationship building, because it's through relationships you can figure out who's in your help bank. It's also a way of helping people think about how they maintain that routine. Next slide. And then we also have a chronic absence letter, which you can use. You could also modify this letter to think about families if you want to target them for summer learning. You could also make sure when we're actually going to create some welcome back materials too. So again, this is a living, breathing toolkit that we're constantly adding to with materials as you go through the year. And Sonya, thank you so much for adding in. Would you mind just wait before we go to Sonya's actual presentation? This is her comment in chat. Would you mind just sharing a little bit about how you might use it with your Parks and Rec?
Sure. So we have a summer partnership program with our Parks and Recs department. So our students attend in our elementary program, attend a half-day summer school program. And then most of our children, we encourage their families to sign them up for our Parks and Recs program. Our Parks and Recs program has a literacy component as part of the programming with our East Hartford Public Library. And so for our families who may not have gotten into our summer school program, it fills up fast, getting them to see the benefits of even just attending the Parks and Recs program, because it continues to build those engagement strategies, continues to allow students to have a routine in the morning, to make friends, to do a little bit of reading, and to have some fun and be outside. I think for our families, our programming is so limited in what we offer within the district itself, that anytime we can make those connections and help each other with our community partners, I think it only builds better relationships, and families become more intentional in their involvement across the school year, not just during the summer.
Thank you so much, Sonya. And we've been hearing in some of the districts that I'm working in, actually not in Connecticut, talking about this as an opportunity. Kids will maybe enroll or sign up for a summer school or summer learning, but then they don't necessarily show up. And so you can both use it for the sign up and then getting them to show up. Kari?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that right now the State Department of Education is reviewing lots and lots of applications for summer enrichment and programs for districts, all districts, not just our high need districts. And so there will be an announcement of all, like there was last year, of lots of enrichment programs for fun for kids. That's coming. So
that's great. And Kari, and I'll put this in chat, but the National Summer Learning Program Association has also created something called Discover Summer.
mm-hmm.
It's a website where you can enter in your zip code,
Yeah.
and then you can find out programs. Hopefully you'll be able to keep updating it with all the new ones, it sounds like, that are coming underway. And then the last thing I just say, and then we're going to actually turn over to East Hartford, is that we are going to be presenting on this at the June 1st LEAP training, and we're talking about this as you could use this for summer for sign up, for show up, and this is for the leap home visitors, for follow up, and then for linking up. So you think about sign up, show up, follow up to make sure things are engaging, supportive, and then linking up to resources. So we're trying lots of ways to pivot off this same idea of showing up matters because it for real. So with that, let's shift this section, and we are going to be moving over to having Sonya Stemmer with East Hartford Public Schools. Kari, do you want to say anything about Sonya at all before we have her just go in and talk about her program and what she's done?
Sure, it's my pleasure to introduce Sonya Stemmer. Did I say that right, Sonya? I hope so. From East Hartford Public Schools, she and I have been working together over the last year or two on LEAP and attendance and chronic absence, and been just so impressed with East Hartford High School. All of the work, but really the secondary schools have been a challenge for many of our districts, and just there's some kind of secret sauce in East Hartford that I wanted Sonya to share with us, so others can learn from what they're doing there. And Sonya, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari. And so, Sonya, why don't you start off by just giving us a sense of East Hartford and East Hartford High School, and what you've been seeing around your data around attendance and chronic absence.
Sure. East Hartford High School has a history of, I would say, average chronic absenteeism. So we are a district of, and actually if you go to the next slide, I can show you exactly who we are. There we go. Perfect, thank you. So East Hartford as a district, we are just about 6,700 students. That number varies depending upon new arrivals into district. We just registered someone this morning in our office quickly who had stopped by. And so if you look, our multilingual population is above the state average. We're at about 15% of our English language learners who come into our district. And our special education population is right now at about 21.2%. So we are a district that does have some high need. We are 50% Hispanic Latinx and 31% African-American Black, 13% white, and 4% Asian Pacific Islander. And then what you can't see there is what we categorize as other. And that's kind of blacked out on that screen, so it's hard to see. But more importantly, when you look at who East Hartford High School is as a representation of that on the next slide, what you will see is that we have 1,600 students at any given time in our high school. So it's a large comprehensive high school. And 50% of our students identify as Hispanic. And 3.7% of our population right now in that building are English language learners. So they are receiving some sort of additional support. And just about 10% of our students identify as special education. And so we know that historically, those populations of students, our English language learners and our special education students, tend to be our students who struggle with attendance most. And so we identified those as some starting off points and digging into our data. But generally speaking, on the next slide, please, what you'll see in our attendance numbers is that in 2017, we averaged around 13.1% in our chronic absentee rates. And our average daily attendance was somewhere around 86%. Now that number is from September 1st until May 18th, when I pulled the data, 17th, when I pulled the data. So I tried to do an accurate pull from start date to stop date on this data. And what you'll notice is that we stayed somewhere between 13 and 14% between 2017 and 2021. Our 1920 data is not accurate data. So that is obviously not in here because of COVID. But what we do know is that our chronic numbers tend to be impacted most heavily by our 9th grade students. Our 9th grade students and our 12th grade students are our higher chronic numbers. And we had to come up with a way to try and reduce that. Simultaneously, post-pandemic, we were brought with some significant challenges of how we were going to reach students, both during the school closure and then our return to teaching. And so that's where we started to see the interplay between instruction, culture and climate, and chronic absenteeism. And that was the intersection of the work that we began in earnest during the close, believe it or not. We started this work back in 2020, somewhere around late March. We started to teach teachers and students how to engage digitally. We were not a one-to-one district. Our students didn't even know they had emails. And so we pivoted in the middle of a pandemic to a full one-to-one district where teachers were actually using Google Classroom and classroom video and instructing online in real time. And so there was a heavy lift by a remarkable staff at the high school to get kiddos engaged. Our rates of engagement during the pandemic were low. We are not going to candy coat that for sure. We worked very hard to get students in the fold so that they would, by the end of the year, be engaged digitally. Next slide, please. So at the same time, on our return, we noted that our home visit journey was going to be an important part of this. And so that became our next step in the process. And that's sort of where our story begins, really. I think that that's the summary of where we were and what our attendance data handed us to make some decisions.
So Sonya, I have to say, what your numbers on whole are still much lower, or much in terms of chronic absence that we're seeing in many, many, many high schools. So tell us a little bit more about what explains how you've been able to achieve such low levels.
So you'll notice the title of this is Relentless Engagement. We have a high school building leader, Matt Ryan, who is exceptional. And this year led the building with the word relentless and said, this will be our word. This will be our mission. This will be our drive. We will be relentless in supporting students and supporting families and bringing everyone back to the table and really making the work that we do in this building matter. We started the year high. We were at 28% in our chronic absenteeism at the start of the year. Families were slow to come back. Reluctant to bring people back full in person, not in a hybrid model. 1,600 students in a building is a lot of students. We were masked, but there were still concerns. We had 2 massive waves of COVID come through in December that wiped out. At one point, I want to say that there were somewhere between 30 and 32% of the 9th and 10th grade classes wiped out by COVID at one point. With extended quarantine, sickness, classroom teachers teaching from home. The difference was classroom teachers were teaching from home. And that's kind of, I think, where we started to see some leverage. We knew that it wasn't just one thing. We couldn't just do home visits, although they were important and they started our work in the summer. We worked this summer to implement the LEAP home visit model and focused very heavily on our incoming 9th grade students. The idea was these were children who had been in a hybrid model in 8th grade that was interrupted by COVID. And now they were coming back to us in a year that was purportedly normal, and we needed to get them involved. And so when LEAP was launched, we really focused our attention on the high school and middle school teams. And we said, what can we do? How can we get these children to come back and feel like they can connect at the high school, having not had a real normal middle school experience? So our home visits were one part of the process, but I can't give it full credit because I think the work that was done with teachers at the middle school level and the high school level to get them comfortable with the way that we teach, using devices, making sure students have access, keeping them connected in some way was really important. And if you go to the next slide, you can really see that in earnest. Our pathways to success are threefold. Teacher professional learning was a critical piece. My office oversees teacher professional learning as well as family and community partnerships and engagement, as well as a myriad of other things. So our teacher professional learning became an important first step. We had to have dedicated professional development that supported concurrent learning and teaching. So we taught teachers how to teach using a computer. Then we taught teachers how to teach using a computer and having students live in front of them, so that when students were quarantined, they could still engage. If a student signed in, engaged in the class, had their camera on, They were considered present. And so for some of our students who were feeling well enough to engage during quarantine, they were able to take part in classes. They were able to continue their learning. That happened because teachers were very willing to put those cameras on, to put students at the helm of manning the chat and being facilitators in the classroom. And then we continued with time to practice and share. So we dedicated our professional learning time to very specific topics. We didn't go the whack-a-mole approach to PD. We really decided it's going to be about our return and recommitment to student-centered learning. And what does that look like in a blended classroom? And what does that look like when we have to incorporate social emotional learning to ensure that students feel welcome and ready? And so that return to school was an opportunity to identify barriers and to problem solve communally on how we're going to fix it. And the building level staff meetings at the high school were given that time and space every Tuesday to do that work. We built a culture that operationalized what students needed. We have an on-track coordinator for grade 9. She's fabulous. She was going to be with us today. Unfortunately, she has today's career and college signing day at the high school. And so they are there celebrating all of our students who are signing their commitments, as it were. So she is celebrating with them. We also brought on a bilingual home visitor. That was critical, knowing that we have a large population of families who speak Spanish and need that additional support. He was ready and willing and jumped right in and has led our now community engagement team, once it was our attendance team, in doing those home visits, not just for attendance, but for relational visits. It's really important for us to know that our high school students feel connected to the building. We did 2 surveys during the pandemic, and we asked students how they felt about the new online learning model. And they kept saying, our teachers are working so hard. Our teachers are so great. You know, we got very few pieces of feedback from students, even when we brought them together in person and had small group discussions about it on Zoom. They were saying things like, we know it's hard for them, you know, to teach on the computer and teach people in real life, and they're doing a really good job. So our students see our staff as hardworking, committed, and connected. And that comes from building a culture where people believe that they matter and that they're heard. We have a team model in grade 9, and I will tell you 100% that teaming grade 9 makes a difference. Students are coming out of a team model in 6, 7, and 8, and having that very difficult transition from middle school to high school bridged with a team in grade 9 makes that such an easy transition for students in terms of their class structure, where they are in the building, who they can rely on and lean on for questions or concerns. For our families, it's a game changer. They know that there are 4 core teachers that they can reach out to at any time, and those 4 teachers know their children. We do Scholar Hour. Scholar Hour is an opportunity for a student to sit down with anyone in the building, review their grades, where they are with their attendance. There's a series of scripted questions that the adult in the conversation has with the student, and it allows the student to be reflective about where they're going, what are their short-term goals, what are their long-term goals, what are the next steps. We problem solve together, whether it be I'm missing some homework, I've had a hard time getting up on Mondays, I don't have a real homework routine after school, I want to get more involved in things. And then the adults from across the district, this starts with our superintendent and goes right across the building. Anyone can participate as an adult in the Scholar Hour process. We allow students to then come to the table and be honest with us about what they need. And then we have weekly advisory, and it is a full social emotional learning platform that teachers deliver weekly in an advisory schedule. It's called Connections. So we know we have culture, and we know teachers have skills. And then we needed to say, okay, what's the third piece? How do we get those students to come to the table? Getting students to come to the table means that teachers need to build classrooms where students want to be there. Students don't want to come to a place where it feels like what they're doing doesn't matter. So we looked at what are the authentic ways that students are going to feel heard, seen, and supported as we return to what we believe is going to be our new normal. And one of those things was teacher flexibility. So we began a book study with the RISE network for grading for equity. And the grading for equity model talked about why we give grades, what should matter, what that holistic process might look like, and why accepting late work right now is what's best for kids. Engagement in classes boosted. Students suddenly discovered I can do a retake for a better grade. I can come back to the table and have a conversation about, hey, I missed 2 weeks of school, but I really want to re-engage. What can I do to make this happen? We had students participate in attendance planning. So now when we're going out to do home visits, we're bringing a student attendance contract and we're having a conversation with the student. What are you going to do? How can we as a team help you? But what's your responsibility in this? And giving high school students the voice to say, this is what I need. This is how I want to get there. These are the steps I'm willing to take, but these are my non-negotiables. For someone who's in 9th or 10th grade, that's a big deal, especially in a time when they haven't felt heard or seen or safe. And our students have not felt those things in quite some time. Our students facilitate our online learning. It's my favorite part about concurrent instruction. I'm really sad to see that we will not be doing any online learning next year. And I do worry about that when our students are in quarantine and learning loss, but I know it is something that the state of Connecticut has determined will not be part, based on some legislation, of the process for next year. Because I will say that that was extraordinary in engaging students and keeping them in the fold when they were out for 5 days because they were being quarantined. So that student facilitation of online learning, where a student is manning the chat while the teacher is teaching, and some teachers would rotate that role. Students knew that if they were home, they were going to be able to communicate with a peer. They were going to be able to ask questions. That peer was going to convey their ideas to the rest of the class. So they felt engaged. They felt like it was meaningful to log in. And finally, relationship building. In the first 2 weeks of school, we intentionally built time in to instructing teachers on how to bring students back into the conversation, how to start building their capacity to get to a place of productive struggle. And we continue that work. That isn't something we've necessarily mastered, but it's the idea of what are the strengths that they brought back. We call it our silver lining thinking. Yes, we were out in a pandemic. Yes, the last 2 years have been incredibly stressful in terms of the cultural context and experience of many of our learners. However, what strengths and superpowers have they built as a result? And we call them our student superpowers. How are you going to leverage those? So if you take a look at what our students were able to share, what are some things you learned about yourself during the pandemic? What are some things you learned about the way you learn because of online learning and hybrid learning? And our students came to the table with some really cool things. I learned that I can do hard things. I learned that I can teach myself a little bit. I learned it's okay to ask for help. I learned that adults in my life are more important than maybe I thought they were. I learned that I don't like being home. So some of that was really, I think, critical in us doing this well. So when I say it wasn't any one thing, it wasn't just a home visit. It wasn't just good instruction. It wasn't just great relationships. It wasn't just really capable teachers. All of those pieces had to come together so that we were really thinking holistically about what are our barriers, what do we know to be true about our learners, and how do we move forward with that knowledge in a way that's intentional and that we can level up year on year so that we're not stopping here. This is the first step in a much larger model of getting our families to be our co-creators within the district, not just the parents of our students. How are they co-creating these experiences for our students? How are we partnering and really leveraging their assets as well?
Sonya, I also want to just remind folks, if folks have questions for you, because what a rich, amazing set of strategies you all have in place, they should put it in the chat. We can certainly open up for other folks' questions. So can you tell us a little bit more about sort of, as you've done this work, what are some of the lessons you've learned?
Sure. If we can go to the next slide. This is just pictures. I'm just bragging really quickly. These are our Family Engagement Tuesdays. So this was one of the lessons we learned early on. Our union supports our teachers, and our union believes that our teachers and their time and their safety are valuable. And when we are asking folks to go out and do home visits, when we're asking folks to engage with families, we need to be mindful that our teachers are the front line. They are with our children every day. Their safety, their security, their time, their mental well-being are all part of this. So we decided to remove one staff meeting every month, and said one staff meeting a month, we are giving back to teachers as family engagement time. You won't do this on your own time. You won't do this when you're trying to go home and manage your own family and your own needs. So we dedicated one Tuesday a month to Family Engagement Tuesdays. And that's an opportunity to build relationships, understand the cultures of our families, and partner for success. It doesn't have to be done in person. We're just highlighting a few of our home visitors in these pictures here. Sometimes whole teams of teachers would go out and they would do a neighborhood canvas and they would hit 5 or 6 houses in an afternoon. But they were really using that time to make phone calls, and not just phone calls about academics, but phone calls checking in. Hey, haven't seen you in a few days. Hope things are okay. I just wanted to celebrate that your child might be the kindest human in my class. Or it could be that they jump on a Zoom because that's easier, or send happy note postcards so that families know in their own handwriting, not an email or a text, that they are really being celebrated. Our families trust us with their most valuable asset, their children. We have a responsibility to be careful and consistent and loving with each of those children. And so when we celebrate them, our families celebrate. And then they feel that trust and connection when we have to have those challenging conversations. But the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about what we had to define. We kept saying we were an assets-based district, but what does that mean? We had a lot of pushback in the beginning. Well, what do you mean by an assets-based district? Well, what are our student assets? Let's define them. What are our teacher assets? And what are our family assets? And how do we draw from those 3 places so that our students feel heard and seen? Our teachers feel like they're leaning into their strengths, and our families know that the hopes and dreams for their children are at least recognized, if not being realized within the classroom community. And so we sit down every other month and have some really difficult conversations about what's working and what's not. And so on the next page, those conversations have been summarized in what we learned. We have to be consistent and follow up. It's absolutely critical that when we make a phone call and nobody answers, we call again. And if we say we're going to follow up, we follow up. We have to honor that sometimes our intent and the impact can be very different. It might be our intent to try and engage a family in a way that we think is appropriate, but the impact of that effort of engagement might have actually distanced the family. So we honor it. We say we made a mistake and we correct course and re-engage that family. Multiple entry points for engagement are critical. We never force a home visit. Never, not ever. We always say we have multiple ways. And yesterday I was at the high school and saw one of the most remarkable things. We have a student who's experiencing significant school refusal. And the child's father was able to get the child in the car and to the parking lot. That's as far as the student would go. The social worker and the trusted teacher came out into the parking lot, stood outside the car, and had a conversation with the student. That was it for the day. The student went home. The student came back this morning and had a conversation in the office. Baby steps to make sure that we're offering multiple entry points to get the students re-engaged. If a family wants to engage virtually, we engage them virtually. If they want to engage only over the phone, only over the phone. If text messages are our first entry point, then we use that as our first entry point. We don't dismiss any one way as being not enough. We build staff capacity. We start with our willing. When we do our home visits that are our paid home visitors that do our weekends and our evenings, those are folks who want to do the work. Our summer home visitor team is full volunteer, and it is comprised of all staff, not just teachers. Any staff member who wants to do a summer home visit is encouraged to do one. We coordinate to make sure that we are not repeating home visits for families, and that every family gets a home visit, and that home visit is a way for someone at home to have a connection and point person with someone in district. We lean into family feedback, even the ones with the capital F. Sometimes feedback with a capital F is hard, but it's also what helps us grow and get better. And we collect student feedback. The voices of our students, they're our customers. We're the only business ever to have that kind of captive audience. And when you think about it that way, why are we not leaning into their feedback when they are the people that we service? Every family should get the chance to connect if they're willing to do so. And so we make sure that we don't exclude any family. We find someone who wants to connect with this family, even our squeakiest wheels. And we work with our unions. That has been a huge lesson, to partner with your unions, partner with leadership teams, partner with community agencies as much as you can. And how can you coordinate that support? And our plan, because of all of these lessons, we have a dedicated summer coordinator now at the high school. We put someone in charge of just doing home visits. And our plan is so articulate and so careful. Every rising ninth grader gets a home visit. That's the goal. Now that's a lot of students, but we are, we're gonna aim for the moon and see. We'll see what happens. In addition, the end of this month, starting the week of the 30th, our home visitor teams are starting with our ninth grade chronic students. They are our first level because they are our students who we know if we can get them now, we can build the right kind of momentum and routine. Then we move on to 11 and 12. We do deep dives in attendance now. We really have to thread out our data. Is this a student who just happened to get caught up in multiple quarantines and that's why they haven't been in school? Or is this legitimately a student who is exhibiting signs of school avoidance early on? And can we catch it before it gets there? Appearance is everything. We no longer have attendance teams starting at the start of this next school year, and I'm super excited about that. This office is leading the work of rebranding our attendance teams to engagement teams. We are family engagement teams, and when we call, we're just calling to see how things are going. We're calling to engage with families, get their feedback, leverage their skills, bring them into the buildings now, which is super exciting, and just partnership, true partnership. We are building a uniform communication platform. So we discovered that we were using 13 different methods at the high school to communicate with families. 13 different ways people were communicating with families. And not all of them were honoring the multilingual experiences of our families. And so we made an investment in a uniform communication platform that allows us to communicate on multiple levels, scaled up, scaled down, specific to one family, cohorts of families or the whole district. And it's fully translatable two-way. And that has been, for us, I think, our next big step in making sure our engagement's authentic. And we continue our professional learning, student-centered instruction, culturally responsive family engagement, and really identifying the needs of teachers and honoring those needs when it comes to how do we communicate with families so that they feel heard and seen.
Sonya, this has been an amazing presentation. I also know that we want to make sure folks have time to discuss and reflect, and you're going to be here for the whole, this whole session. I am wondering, Stephen, if we should stop now, let people reflect and think about what they've heard, and then when they come back, they can both talk about what ideas they'd like to take on, as well as if they have further questions for Sonya, because sometimes it's when you're thinking about applying ideas that you end up with your questions. Would that make sense, Stephen? Because I know we've gone a little long, but I just really thought it was so important for Sonya to be able to share her whole story. And you are muted, Stephen. So I think you're talking to us, but I can't hear you.
All right, dear. So you tell me, because right now we're going to go into breakout rooms. So you want to just set the stage for those, and 20 minutes, how do you want to do this? Because I've
Steve,
created.
do you want to put the slide up with the with the breakout sessions and go over that slide with folks, and then
Okay.
Give them instructions for going into breakout sessions. We're going to have 20 minutes.
And Sonya, as you're doing that, we're already getting kudos in the chat. Amazing work. It is truly spectacular what you're doing, the thoughtfulness. I love that you have engagement, not attendance teams, all for it. Attendance is just a sign of whether you're engaged, and absence is a sign that you're disengaging.
Yep.
Okay. So here we are. So what we're going to do is I've created 4 breakout rooms. I'll open those very shortly. You're going to self-select.
Stephen, I don't think the slide is it showing?
No.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. Sorry. All right. Here you go. All right. So what we're going to do is I've created a Jamboard. I'm going to drop the link in the Jamboard. After we open up the breakout rooms, you're going to self-select whether you are a central office staff member or elementary, middle, or high school. And I've created, with these questions, I've created the Jamboard. And think about an idea that you've learned from this session that you might want to bring back to your district. Why did it resonate with you, and what steps would you take to introduce this back to your district or school? All right. And these are kind of like the ground rules that usually we have. Person whose last name is closest to A helps facilitate. Person whose last name is closest to Z kind of takes the notes on the notes for the Jamboard and helps report out. All right. And these are kind of some of the meeting agreements during the breakout room. All right, any questions on that? All right, so let me get the link for the Jamboard. Here's the link that I'm gonna drop in the chat right now. We'll look forward to it. All right, so there's the link for the Jamboard. Okay. Let me open up our breakout rooms.
And we're going to have 20 minutes. It says 30, but we're going to do 20 minutes. So we have time to come back and talk.
Okay. All right.
So folks can self-select, Stephen, if they want to go to central office, elementary school, middle or high.
Yeah.
So folks, there's a little 4 squares as breakout rooms. Hopefully you can notice that. Or if you want to go into one and you're having trouble getting into one, then why don't you, I think you can let Stephen know and he can send you there.
Yeah. You just tell me and we'll come back at little before 11:15. Okay.
Yep.
So, and hopefully, and I think we could also go into some of them. I think we need at least 2 people in a breakout room for it to be a discussion.
So
we got 1 in central office, 1 in middle, 2 in high school.
Yeah, we have Ken, we have a few people not joined. We have no one in elementary.
Does anyone have any questions on how to get into the breakout room?
They're joining now. They're already in, some of them.
Okay.
Okay, few now. We've got 3 in central office.
So Rachel's by herself in middle school. Rachel, you want to join high school maybe? Bridge goes up to the high school, right?
Also, the person from Lyman's, she was trying to figure out, Sabina Scott is her, Sabina. Can you see the 4 little breakouts? And then when you click on it, you can see where you can join, or I think she wants to join high school.
I just moved her there, yeah.
Okay.
So all we have left, so we have Ken, we have 1 in elementary and 1 in middle.
I'm now 2 in elementary and 1 in middle.
Yeah, so 2's in elementary, 3's in central office. We're all set with the rooms. It's except middle school. Rachel Allison at the Bridge Academy.
Do you want me to go to the middle?
Okay.
Or Sonya, maybe, actually, because then, yeah, Sonya, join middle.
Sure,
No,
absolutely.
that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, everyone's in their breakout rooms.
Christina, are you there?
I am. I'm trying to decide. I don't know if I want to go to central office. I think I want to go to middle school or high school.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll join high school. Okay, I'm going.
Okay, Christina,
All right.
right. And Anthony.
Sometimes people get sidetracked and
Yeah.
they're still there.
Yeah.
So it looks like,
Is Sonya Aponte, is she with us today? Her name
Yeah,
is
she's in there. She's.
But
says
her
she's
her name is in there, but it doesn't look like it activated, like it's not green.
Hmm.
It says not joined. So I'm wondering if,
Well, it could be that she's here, but, you know, had to do other stuff, so missed
Right,
the-
right.
doing the breakout. You at least have 2 people in every one. There's one, the central
Well,
office that only has two people. The other is 3, 3, and 4.
boy, you start
that's
for
only
stupendous.
12 people and we had 27. So we lost more than half the people when we went to break out.
Yeah,
Yeah, wasn't sure what to do there, Kari, like whether you stay in whole group or whether you go to break, you know, it's
Yeah, I know,
hard.
we talk about that all the time. It's
Yeah,
some, if they like breakout, they'll go. If they don't, they're gonna leave. So we got the meat of the meeting in.
Hey, Stephen, should we stop the recording for right now?
oh,
You know, we're just thankful that they came